10. In this bubble, we have -5, -4, -1. The arrows are still going to correspond with the same numbers. So 7 is still going to point to -4. And 8 is still going to point to -5. 9 is going to point to -4. And 10 is going to point to -1. When you're trying to determine if it's a function or not, you're looking at the arrows in the X bubble. So if any of your arrows come off a number twice, it's being used twice. So look here at number -4. Because there's that arrow coming off twice, it's used twice. So no, the relation is not a function. Now if you look at the inverse though, none of the numbers have an arrow coming off it twice. So this one would be yes, it is a function. All right. And then we have coordinate points. So when you have coordinate points and you're finding the inverse, you are just going to flip them around. So instead of 5, -1, -1, 5. And then this one would be -3, 5. And this one would be -6, 5. And this one would be 10, 4. And then you're looking at all the X numbers. So all of the X numbers to determine if it is a function or not. So for the relation, that's your original, so ignoring what I wrote here. So the original, I have 5 repeating a couple times, so the relation is no, not a function. In the inverse, -1, -3, -6, 10, nothing's repeating, so that would be yes, it is a function. Oh, now you're not wanting to zoom in and out for me? Okay. Find the domain of the relation, domain and range. So because this is discrete numbers, they're individual points, you're just going to list for domain all of the X values. So 5, I don't have to repeat it, 5, 5, and 4. And then the range is going to be -1, -3, -6, and 10. And then the domain and the range are of the inverse. Well, they're just going to flip-flop. The range is going to be 5 and 4. And then domain is going to be -1, -3, -6, and 10. There it goes. Okay, so when you're looking at a graph, this is the relation. It says, is it a function? So that's the vertical line test. If you can draw a vertical line and it hit it only one time, then yes, it is a function. To find the inverse, it is going to be reflected across this line y = x. And so like these points here on the graph are going to get reflected over this line. Let me do it in a different color so maybe you can see it a little bit better. If it's hard to visually see, remember you can always flip-flop the points around. So for example, this point here is at -3, 0. And so if you flip that around, that's going to be at 0, -3. And you see how that point got reflected across the line? So see, this point right here is at -2, 1. So if you flip it around, it's going to be at 1, -2. And you could also make a table off to the side if you want. And so see, this point is going to get reflected kind of like right there. And so you're going to make a graph look something like that. And so for the green line that I drew, is the inverse a function? Yes, it would be, because that also is going to pass the vertical line test. All right. On problem 10, now we're talking about finding the inverse algebraically. There's a couple ways that you can do this. If I were you, first we're going to write this as y, just so it looks nicer. And then we're going to switch around the x and the y. All right, so that just gets us started. And so now we're doing the actual solving bit. If I were you, I would get rid of the 4 first. And the 4 is being multiplied because of the parentheses. So the opposite of that is going to be dividing. So you're going to divide by 4. And remember, there's very little you're going to do on the left side. You just write it as x over 4. Okay, so now on this side, we have y minus 7. To get rid of the -7, we're going to add 7. Once again, there's very little you're going to do over here on the left side. Your inverse is going to be x over 4 plus 7. Now on your test, it is going to be multiple choice. And so you do have to be kind of mindful of how the multiple choice answers are written. It says, is x over 4 plus 7 the inverse? Your answer here is going to be yes. That's how we found it. But over here, x plus 28 over 4. So you have to know that when you have a fraction, a big fraction like this is the same thing as written as x over 4 plus 28 over 4. You can split your fraction up. And you might see it both ways. It's not like it's always this way or it's always this way. You could see it both ways. I think on the test, it is more split up, and that's why we're going to practice that when we did the scavenger hunt. And then where they're getting 7 from is 28 divided by 4 is 7. So this one is also the inverse. It's just written a different format. These two things here are the exact same thing. One, the fraction got split up. One, the fraction stays the same. But other than that, it's the same thing. Okay. Problem 11. Let's see if it's going to focus.